talked to people at the Pentagon, high-level people, generals, admirals, and they are very disturbed. They don't think Hegseth is up to the job. They worry. One of the reasons that Trump may be giving Hegseth a pass on Signalgate, even though he was the one who shared classified information, is that Trump wants somebody particularly weak atop the Pentagon.
We're talking now about national security, and the erstwhile advisor, Mike Waltz, has said he is honored to continue his service to the Trump administration after it was announced earlier today he will leave his post and instead be nominated to serve as ambassador to the United Nations. His exit marks the conclusion of Signalgate, where Waltz inadvertently added the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine to a group chat including sensitive information about U.S. missile strikes in Yemen before they took place. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will take on the role in the interim. Let's discuss the fallout, the implications of all this with David Rothkopf, author of Running the World, the inside story of the National Security Council and the architects of American power. David, welcome to the program.
My pleasure.
Right, okay. So we know that Trump wanted to keep Waltz. I mean, after this scandal first erupted, he said, well, Mike Waltz, he's a great guy. He's learned his lesson, etc. What do you think forced his hand?
Well, I mean, we can only imagine what's going on behind the scenes. I think, there are reports that, one of the things that Waltz did was offer views that didn't jibe with Trump's views, including suggesting that we get a little tougher on Russia after Russia went hard against Ukraine. That may have alienated Trump a bit. I think there was pressure to do something about Signalgate. They wanted to wait, I think, until after the first 100 days, but I think that may have affected it to some degree. And now they've done this kind of neat trick of saying, well, he's fired, but he's actually going to the United Nations. That may sound like a promotion to your listeners, but the reality is the United Nations is not a favored place by this administration, and it's a little bit like being sent to Siberia.
What does it say about Trump's position? The man to whom you must bend the knee, a king in all but name. Doesn't this show, as well as him yielding a little bit on tariffs, that he can be pushed?
Well, he certainly can be pushed. And I think the lesson of the first 100 days of this second Trump administration is he's a bully, and he acts like bullies do. When he sees weakness in somebody, he doubles down, he gets tougher. But when he gets back strength, when another party shows some resolve, whether it's an individual or a country or an institution, then he caves. And so we've seen it, the markets said no to his policies 3 different times, and he reversed himself. China has been very tough in response, and he's beginning to back off of that. Harvard University rejected some of his attacks, and he backed off of some of those. And so I think, that there's a lesson for the world in this. If you bend the knee, he is going to make more demands. He's going to be more trouble for you. If you stand up and you're strong, then you're very likely to get a better outcome.
In real terms, how do you think the erstwhile allies in the European Union, of course, we here in the UK, and others who are struggling to work out how to respond to Trump 2.0, will they take heart from some of this? And if so, how do you think they may adapt their approach to this White House?
Well, I think they will adapt their approach. That's what governments do as they see. Some governments have a stronger predisposition to get tougher with him. I think they will have a better luck early. I think the EU as an organization faces some challenges because there's a range of views within it. But even the EU, when the Trump administration launched the tariffs, the first response of the EU was, okay, well, we'll just get rid of our tariffs. How do you like that? And the Trump administration backed off. They were like, "Oh, okay, we're going to take this in a different direction." So they've seen some examples of being tough. I think your own government in the UK is confused at the moment about whether to bend the knee or to take a tougher course of action. And I don't know if it's popular with your listeners.
Well, it's
to
not
hear
that
this,
popular
but
with a lot of listeners. They think that we shouldn't be, the sovereign nation shouldn't be bending the knee. But some people say, well, the United States, our closest ally, or certainly was, and if it means, if we want to get a good trade deal and we need to roll out the red carpet to Windsor Castle or Buckingham Palace, then so be it. If it means Trump having a golf tournament at Thornbury, so be it. There's no consensus here.
If it were that easy, it would be great. But
Yeah.
as I've said, every time somebody law firms in the United States were threatened by him, and a bunch of them said, "Okay, well, we'll do whatever you want," and then he came at them and said, "No, I need more than that."
Yep.
And so that's a bit of a problem. I think somebody who seems to be handling it well, which is getting tough and then being open when Trump starts to capitulate a little bit, is the brand new government in Canada.
Yes, Mark Carney, formerly governor of the Bank of England, right here. I'm just thinking about what Trump has done, ditching Waltz there and sending him to the political equivalent of Siberia, as you said. What about Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, a former Marine, but considered to be chaotic? Some people are still concerned about possible drinking on the job, but who knows what's going on there, but he denies it. Fair enough. Okay, but how safe is the defense element of national security in his hands? He's got no experience of managing something like this. And apparently there's meltdown at the Pentagon. How seriously did you take those concerns?
Very seriously. I've talked to people at the Pentagon, high-level people, generals, admirals, and they are very disturbed. They don't think Hegseth is up to the job. They worry. One of the reasons that Trump may be giving Hegseth a pass on Signalgate, even though he was the one who shared classified information, is that Trump wants somebody particularly weak atop the Pentagon. Not because of national security reasons, but because he thinks, and some of the people close to him think, that if there are demonstrations or there are problems at the border, he wants to be able to use the military against them. Which would be, of course, a violation of 250 years of tradition in this
Using
country.
the U.S. Army against American citizens on American soil.
Exactly. And that came up in the last administration. You'll recall when there were the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, he went and said, let's do it. And the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Mark Milley, and the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, both said no. And he doesn't want that to happen again. And he knows that Hegseth is weak as can be, and it's perverse, but he sees that as a strength.
So much for a war-fighting position. Finally, this rare earth deal between the US and Ukraine, it's being described in the diplomatic language of win-win. But how fair would it be to say that Ukraine have actually tipped the balance in their favor in those 2 months since the row in the White House?
Well, I think it's pretty fair. The scope of the agreement became much narrower. The constraints on Ukraine in terms of joining the EU and so forth have been removed from it. The deal itself is pretty amorphous in terms of what it might mean for the United States. But I think Ukraine looks at it and says, well, Trump gets a win, and maybe this means he'll be more supportive of us. I think they may be making a mistake there, because Trump has always at the end shown more loyalty and deference to the Kremlin. But the Ukrainians are making a gamble. They've been through a lot. I think they think it may be worth the gamble. There's another point of this, by the way, just in conclusion, and that is, nobody's sure just quite how many rare earth metals they've got, what the reserves are. Yep. 20, 30, 40% of the reserves are under land currently controlled by Russia. So, what the deal may actually truly mean is really murky right now.
And a quick thought on the Kremlin. What do you think we'll hear from them when they say something officially?
I think, you heard from them tonight. They attacked Zaporizhia. The Kremlin's message is, we're going to fight. We're going to continue to fight because they know that's how they want to negotiate with Trump. Problem with the Kremlin is they may be taking the right negotiating tactic. They never keep their word. negotiating with the Kremlin is, is a futile effort. I mean, I think of how many agreements have been struck with Putin that he just ignored, including the one to respect Ukrainian sovereignty.
Yeah. David Rothkopf, author of Running the World, the inside story of the National Security Council and the architects of American power. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on Times Radio.